Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Sameshwara Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. Um, this is pretty loaded podcast. There's so much, we could do a podcast every day, and so many topics we hit on that we could spend a whole hour on. But I think that's not the point either. I'd like to just introduce you to different things, and then you can reflect on it and decide for yourself. And I don't think it really requires too much of forcing one perspective, to the extent that I can control myself, because I do have perspectives on things, But at any rate, Queen Elizabeth, she passed away after 70 some years, and brings up a lot of interesting points and critical issues, and one of them that I'd like to talk about is just the idea that, in Britain, they don't have a constitution. Did you know that, Scotty?
No,
I didn't either.
What do they call it? Or they have something, right?
Well, they have different documents. It wasn't Magna Carta, just different documents, but they don't have any one constitution. And that's why international law fascinates me so much, because the mentality in different nations is so dramatically different. And so how do you negotiate business or anything else between nations, Just one example that I was told was that in the United States, if there's a large piece of property and the owner passes away, it's common to divide it up evenly among the children or the family members. And in Britain, that's just unheard of. The idea is that they view a piece of property in that sense as a living entity almost. And so it has to stay intact. And generally speaking, I guess it goes to the oldest son or whatever the tradition is. But not to get into a discussion about if that's right or wrong so much as just the degree to which things are different. I mean, we have a constitution and we rely on it, and they don't even have a constitution. And so some say that royalty, the royal family, and bear with me on this one, but the royal family, the idea is that the royal family is sort of the upholders of a constitution of sorts. And, what does that mean? Well, first of all, the royalties, and this is, of course, an idealized notion, just with our constitution, how much we honor it and how much we ignore it and all that, certainly isn't an absolute. There, we're dealing with people, the royal family, and we could say, just like with the Constitution, there's an ideal, everybody's created equal, at least like that. In England, the royal family, the idea is that the royal family would be the embodiment of those laws of nature, of those values, of those qualities. And they would uphold that and act as sort of like a guiding light for the whole country. Now, obviously, throughout history, I mean, think of Henry VIII as an extreme example, but even today, I mean, there's the whole thing with Epstein and who was it? Prince Edward, was it? Scott, I think that was his name. Anyway, all sorts of things being compromised and how they navigate those waters. But a lot of people say this, a lot of people say something different. But a lot of people feel that Queen Elizabeth, she certainly tried, and some people say she succeeded in really being an embodiment of that apolitical, noble quality, and lived her life that way. And through that, then she radiated that value as a guiding light for the society. And I really don't want to get off onto, see, you have the human value, and then you have the idealized structure, just like with the Constitution. It points to an ideal, but do we live up to it? And the same is there, but it is, I think, a beautiful concept that their Constitution isn't really written so much as it's embodied in that sense. And if you look at her history, I mean, she was around a long time, and she knew every president, I think, since Truman. I guess she'd never met Johnson, but all the other presidents she met. And she had an elegance, a dignity, a decorum, a class. And through that, even though she didn't get into politics with it, she swayed leaders of other nations. She endeared them. She influenced them, and just speaks to really to the degree to which, in a general sense, how much the personalities of the leaders of a country, how much that plays into international relations. It's really quite remarkable.
Well, do you
And for
think
that, people say she was great. Yes, Scotty?
do you think it was that she didn't get into politics publicly, or she did it behind the scenes?
Oh, I would think you're right. I mean, she's human, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But just that she, I think she did a good job. From the little I know, I'm no specialist on, you know, the royal family or anything, but from the little I know and from what the little I've seen, she did a good job upholding that idealized value that embodied the nobility and the dignity of Great Britain. I know, when was this? Was decades ago, and I was visiting Disney World down in Orlando, and I had a vet practice in Clearwater Beach area, and I brought my whole staff and everybody, and we would spend a day there. And I bumped into this one guy with his family, and he was from England. And I said, "Oh," he said, "the most dignified people in the world." And he said, "Well, we used to be." And I don't know, we chuckled, you know, together. But see, that's the thing, is there are qualities, attributes to different nations. I mean, think about the idealized notion of Great Britain, you know, dignity and like that. And of course, when it's healthy, it's elegant and beautiful. When it's not healthy, it's, you know, stuffed shirt, right? Scotty, I think that'd be the expression.
Right.
In the United States, what's that?
Tradition and
Tradition, I like that. United States would be what? Creativity, independence, freedom, and of course, all these things, you know, have their idealized value, their altruistic value, and then what happens when it goes awry, you know. But now, the one other thing I want to say about the royal family now is King Charles. It's hard to even say, it used to be Prince Charles, now he's King Charles. He has a history of being pretty political. He was really into the Green New Deal and all that. And so it's going to be interesting to see when he steps into that new position, if he upholds that sort of tradition of, you know, the royal family doesn't get into politics, or not. I, for one, hope he does. I'd like to think that they live up to an ideal of that, just the notion of nobility, balance, equanimity, that sort of thing.
Yeah, from what everybody's saying that I heard yesterday is that he's going to have to give up all that.
Yeah, I mean, at least he's supposed to. Yeah. But now, what does this have to do with the podcast today? Actually, quite a bit. Because the idea is that there's an underlying structure. In the United States, it's the Constitution. In England, the way we're talking now, we could say it's the royal family. And that provides an underlying structure that upholds the integrity, the decency, the quality, the culture of a nation. And what we have in the Vedic tradition, just the nature of existence and what the ancient seers have told us, the secret of an ideal society, a healthy society, is that underlying it, and see, this goes all the way to the absolute, all the way to the transcendental value. There's a word in Sanskrit, ratna, people say ratna. It means gemstone. But in Sanskrit, words have all different levels of meaning. And on the deepest level, it's the structure, the crystalline-like structure that underlies all existence. In the structure of the Veda, there are the 10 mandalas. In the first mandala, I think it's the 9th word of the first mandala, the very beginning, you could say, of the first mandala is ratna. It means crystalline matrix. And so you see there's a crystalline underlying matrix to what? The one thing that exists is just pure consciousness. Consciousness equals isness. You can think about that for a long time. Isness is the consciousness, the pure consciousness, before it's even conscious of anything else. But it's this, you can't even use the word stuff because it's not a thing. But due to limitations of the language, we'll say it's the thing that is the source of all things. It's the field of pure no thingness. So consciousness then, by its nature is conscious, becomes conscious of itself. Two things are born, and there's a process there of how it becomes conscious. So there's the knower, the known, and the process of knowing. Rishi Devata Chandas, the Holy Trinity in Christianity, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, like that, Holy Spirit. And that process is enlivening, it's eternally self-interacting, and it creates this crystalline matrix, this crystalline structure that underlies all existence. Now, there are geometric representations in the Vedic tradition. There's one right above Lakshmi here. That's the Sri Yantra. The Sri Yantra is a two-dimensional geometric representation of the structure of the self-interacting dynamic of consciousness. It's a crystal. It's a yantra. Actually, yantras generally in temples you'll see them, but they're actually like three-dimensional. They're like a pyramid, and just the picture you see there is as if you took a picture of the pyramid looking down on it. So at any rate, within this Sri Yantra, then you've got the whole underlying structure. And then you see now this gets very cool because deep inside it, we all know everything. But the thing is, it's shrouded in beliefs and identities and preconceived notions and all the things we've talked about, notions, echoes of truth, perceived as truth, hold truth at bay, that sort of thing. But underlying then all of creation is this structure. And within that structure, just like when you look at a kaleidoscope, through a kaleidoscope, you can see it like, it's the dance of a five-pointed star, and all the other things. As you turn the thing, you see different patterns around the five-pointed star. You can look at it another way and say, no, it's just the dance of two, white and the other color. Or no, somebody else may say, well, no, it's not just white and the other colors, it's white, and there's a whole spectrum of colors. So it's a dance around the spectrum. And so you see, you can look at that structure in different ways as it self-interacts within these yantras. And these yantras, now the word isn't really a still picture, though that's the way we see it. And when we look at a yantra, but it actually means gears. So it's the gear system, you can say, the mechanic of that self-interacting dynamic in a very geometrically exquisite way. That is underlying the basis of all existence. And so when you look at it one way, you can say it's a dance around the five. You can look at it another way and say, oh, no, it's a dance around the spectrum in another way. So you can be viewed different ways. And if you accentuate, if you pull out one perspective, one quality and emphasized it's the dance around the two, or emphasized it's the dance around the three, or what have you, then what you get are the different yantras for the different faces of the one God, because each of those structures has a personified correlate. You can look at me and I'm a geometric structure of cells and muscles and bones and tissues, but what really gives it meaning is the personified value, me, a person. And like that, we're talking about the geometric underlying crystalline structure that supports all existence. But each of these different values within it has a different personified facet of that exquisite diamond, if you will.
Michael,
Now, similarly, it's interesting that's how these nations are structured too. They each have their own underlying basis, be it the royal family or the Constitution. And then when those things are healthy, when the understanding of others healthy and fully alive and lived, then it feeds life and supports all of the nation. And like that, when we live in harmony with that underlying structure, then our lives become full and abundant. And so really the key to life, you could say, is having a country, a nation, the individuals all living in harmony with what? The underlying basis of existence. What does that mean? Nature. And so there's a very precise mathematical, geometric component to it. Okay, Scotty, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
well, no, that made me think of something else. So, in each country, is there a mechanic or an operator or an expression of that, pure consciousness,
Yeah,
that's,
well, you could
that's identified for that place,
Yeah, and in one sense, you can say that every single citizen, in one sense or another, is that. It's a different personified component. And then we get into the thing, well, but how distorted is that? How much of a veil of identity, preconceived notions, Maya, limited thinking, all that is shrouding that underlying essence, that divine spark that dwells within every individual and at every point in creation, you see?
Yeah, because as an individual, they can also affect other individuals.
You bet.
Right? Yeah.
You bet. You bet. And so they say that, one person fully living in harmony with that, say an enlightened being, has a huge effect on the environment and other people. Of course, other people, when they view an enlightened person, they don't view him from the perspective of that lies beyond their identity. They perceive him, view him through the programming, the conditioning of their own shroud, And so that's why this whole thing is, if somebody was going to go meet Jesus, for example, would they think he's some great guy? Well, depends on the nature of their shroud, doesn't it? I mean, there were Lord Krishna. I mean, there were Rakshasas. There were people that hated him. They destroyed Dwarka, that's his city. That kind of thing. So it's the whole thing is far more elusive than one may think.
The other thing, Michael, before I forget, was from a physics perspective, how they're using the collider to break down the different particles. Are they trying to break it down to, how does that map onto?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. We're speaking there in the arena of quantum mechanics. What's quantum mechanics? Quantum mechanics is the study of the mechanics of creation at a level so deep within creation that those quantized point values, those points within the geometric structure that form the yantra, how they interact. It's the mechanics of the quantization of nature. And on the most fundamental level, you could say it's all quantized. Now, and so when they're splitting these atoms and doing all that different stuff, what they're doing is they're taking a look at the quantum building blocks for different entities within that structure. An atom is electrons, protons, neutrons, like that. And you can divide that up and you get all different kinds of subatomic particles. And they're all part of that mosaic, all part of that quantum mechanical structure that's represented by a yantra. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. Great question, Scotty.
Do they get to the, where does that go for them, do you think? I mean, do they keep finding smaller and smaller particles, or do they just, at some point, they found everything and that's just what it is?
There are certain fundamental building blocks, and see there's a line in, I think it's in the Upanishads. It says, how many gods are there? And it says, there are an infinite number of gods. And Yagyavaka, the student, asks again, well, how many gods are there? And they say, well, there are 1,000,000 gods. Ask again, how many gods are there? There are, I forget, 1,000 gods. Finally, it gets down to 100 gods, 108 gods, whatever, 10 gods, 50 gods, 1.5 gods, and one god. So in a way, I'd say your question is kind of speaking to that. It depends on the system with which you broke down the categorization of the subatomic particles, I think. And if you look at it one way, there are an infinite number of them, No two subatomic particles are alike. I hope that's responsive.
Sure.
Yeah. So there's another Sanskrit term. It's called smriti, S-M-R-I-T-I. It's memory. And what memory is you see there's this intelligence, this self-interacting dynamic of oneness, this yantra value, if you will, this underlying structure. And it's precise. It's mathematically perfect, you see? But within that structure, then, as it emerges out into relativity, see, that's the difference. There's the absolute, it's the absolute value of the structure, and then there's a relative value of the structure. What does that mean? That means that they're entities born of that structure, but they get lost to the glamour, you could say. It's called Maya, illusion. They get lost to the glamour, for lack of a better word, of the structure. So they kind of lose the notion of the perfect union and perfect symmetry and perfect harmony of the structure, and it becomes then relative, the field of relativity. It's no longer, I am that, thou art that, all of this is nothing but that, and it becomes, I'm over here and you're over there. You see, it's easy to take that and see, that's why conceptualization is one thing, actualization is very different. Because, we can conceptualize that. Oh, yeah, I get it. I'm that, thou art that, all this is nothing but that. I must be enlightened. Well, that's good beginning, mistaken for if you want to use the word goal. Conceptualization is a notion. Actualization is when you live it. But living it isn't based on the conceptualization of what living that is supposed to be like. Living it is in the world, but not of it, but still functioning within the dynamic of separation while living in the state of unity. Freedom from desire, for example, means that you are that placed deep inside. It does not mean that on the level of surface life, you don't have any preference between vanilla or chocolate ice cream. It's like patting your head and rubbing your belly at the same time. So you're living these different levels of life. And even though it's integrated, there's a personal component to it, your own personality. One enlightened person may prefer chocolate ice cream. Another enlightened person may prefer vanilla ice cream. Who knows? And so the whole thing is far more exquisite than one may think. So how do we navigate these waters? One of the difficulties is that when we try, okay, great, I get that. I want to, be enlightened and stuff. So we create an idealized set of notions, largely based on emotions, but also on intellect. And we say, okay, well, if I can live that and feel that more, and oh my God, I feel it so much, it's so incredible, then we think they're enlightened. But that's just an astral echo. Echoes of truth truth perceived as truth, which hold truth at bay. You see, and therein lies the birth of all sorts of tangential belief systems and convictions and modalities and methodologies that permeate every religion. You see, so what's the way? It just makes me flash on that movie, The Matrix. There's a line in The Matrix that says, "The Matrix can't tell you who you are." Well, oftentimes, if you were to view our existence as a matrix, that's exactly what we try to do, is we try to find a belief system, a way of behaving that we can measure ourselves by and measure other people by to determine how enlightened they are. And it's just not that simplistic. You see, the matrix can't tell you who you are. So what the rishis, now rishis is another whole, we could talk about what the rishis are, who the rishis are for a long time. But basically, to say it simplistically, you've got the absolute, then you've got this whole field of smrti, and then you've got the relative, smrti being memory of the perfection within the absolute. And then you've got this process through which relativity manifests out of the absolute. And the mechanism of that process, when viewed from the scientific, the mechanical perspective, is what a rishi is. But now a rishi also has a personified correlate, and that's what we generally think of when we think of rishis. When we think of the gods, we don't think of a mechanic, we think of a personified quality, and like that. So then we have the rishis, and then the rishis then are that's why they call them the upholders of dharma, the upholders of simplistically saying it, right action. And on a certain level, it's about right action, but on a deeper level, it's like the modes of action that are in harmony with nature. You see, and they uphold that value, and through their cognitions. What's a cognition? A cognition means that it's like they have one foot in the absolute and they got a toe in the relative, so they can give expression to the intelligence, that divine intelligence, if you will, within the self-interacting dynamic of pure oneness, and express it out into relativity. Those are the Vedic cognitions. That's where the Veda came from. And that's when I say the Veda, that's where the Veda came from. The Veda is in the absolute, but I'm talking about Vedic literature, okay? That's where it came from. It was cognized. And so within those cognitions, there are, we could say, instructions, if you will, of like signpost guidelines of how to live one's life, what meditation technique, all sorts of Vastu techniques, Gandharva, music, all sorts of different things that you can work with that will help you to evolve, which means what? To evolve means to attune yourself to live more and more in harmony with your own true nature, which is Mother Nature, which is Veda, okay? I hope I said that. We can split hairs about how things are said, but that gives you the idea. And so one of the cognitions by a Rishi Mamuni Mayan, he's kind of like sidekick of Vishwakarma, the cosmic architect. And that's where this whole idea of Vastu science comes from, the Sthapatya Ved, the knowledge of how to build a physical thing that resonates with the qualities of that self-interacting dynamic within the absolute, and so helps to enliven and bring it forth and radiate out into the environment. And it's Vedic architecture. And within the arena of Vedic architecture, there's the cognition of Mamuni Mayan, who's a rishi, who explained how to build a temple that radiates that source of health, healing, intelligence, divinity, all those words apply, and bring that value out, well it up so it radiates to the environment, and thereby you could say heals, purifies, harmonizes the environment. And of course, other parts of the Veda give meditation techniques to do that. But it gets so complicated in a way, because as time changes, the laws of nature change. The laws of nature are different in the middle of the night than they are at 12 noon, for example. And that's a mini cycle, but they're large cycles that last thousands of years. And so there are meditation techniques in the Veda that don't apply to our time, you see. But nevertheless, Vastu science does provide a technology for this time whereby we can build what's called a unified field generator. By unified field, we mean that underlying essence of divinity. And it enlivens and brings out that value and radiates it out to the environment. And a temple does that to a great extent. But then also there's something called an enlightened city. And one of the beautiful things about it is, what is it radiating out? It's radiating out that crystalline structure that is inherent in the nature of the absolute. That crystalline structure that upholds the divinity, the purity, the life force, the health of all things that exist. And again, like with yantras, there are different values of the crystalline structure you can pull out. That's why there's a Shiva temple. Then again, there's a Durga temple. Then there are all these different kinds of temples that are enlivening different values of that wholeness. Now, each of those, though, is part of the wholeness. So whichever one you follow as a path, so to speak, it'll ultimately lead you to the same place, which is fullness of life. But they're like different gateways. But now there's another thing. It's called an enlightened city. And what an enlightened city is, it's a whole city, not just a temple, but a whole city that's comprised of a number of different temples, all strategically placed just in the right spatial relationship. It's all geometric, you see, so that one resonates with the other one, and they all resonate with each other. And of course, each and every one and all of them taken in total resonate with that value of the absolute. And so it becomes a very, very powerful resonator, very, very powerful radiator. One such structure, one such enlightened city is enough for each continent. Radiates out so much coherence, so much harmony that it purifies the environment, you see? And that's the ultimate way. If we've talked in the past about we've got to clean the fishbowl, you know, because what? Everybody is divine. You're divine. Your essence is what? The unified field. My essence, unified field. Everything. But the thing is, as we lose our identities to surface values, perspectives, belief systems like that, and we become more and more disconnected with the source of health and life, even though oftentimes done in the name of health and life, you see. Echoes of truth perceived as truth hold truth at bay. And so what that does is it kind of gunks up the works. Pollution, in the highest sense of the word, is the result of lack of alignment with natural law, not just the pollution that you see in the atmosphere, but pollution on every level of existence. You see, and so I compare it to a fishbowl that's dirty. If a fishbowl is dirty and the water's all cloudy and stuff, it's going to affect all the fish. Yeah, sure, some will be healthier and others will be less healthy. And then the behavior of the fish, if we can go off on tangents here a little bit to stretch out the analogy, make some fish fight other fish, and the whole thing just becomes a mess. And how do you then fix the mess? You clean the fish bowl, and then all the fish are become healthy. You see, and it's kind of along those lines. Now, when we meditate, we could say that we clean the fish bowl of our own physiology. You see, and so you're not going to get a whole bunch of healthy fish in a polluted fish bowl. It's just not going to happen, you know? And that's really what we're saying. That's what Mount Soma is all about. You could say that we're building a crystalline structure, and it's not a physical crystal, of course, but it's within the ethers, within the underlying structure of existence. It purifies there's a word in Sanskrit, akash. It purifies the akashic level, purifies all levels. So that then quite naturally people start living true to their own self. And that doesn't mean their preconceived notion of self or their self based on identities or anything like that. It means the divine self, the transcendental self. And that's how you heal a planet. Anything more on that, Scotty? Or I'd like to say a couple other things.
No, that's good. Yeah.
Okay. So one thing just real quick. UFOs. I want to talk a little bit about UFOs. You know, the government now is coming out with these films of, Navy aviators who filmed UFOs flying around and like that. And so it's in the news. But there's one thing that's very interesting. There's this there's this TV series called Ancient Aliens, another one called Ancient Aliens Declassified. And most of that I really think it's just off on a tangent where I just don't think where they're going is right, even though it is true that they visit all these different structures all over the world, in Peru and India and everywhere else, that we don't even know how they build them today. And so obviously there are technologies, the pyramids like that, there are technologies that we're not aware of. And of course they say the ancient aliens built them, but we don't have an appreciation for the duration of time and the nature of time and how knowledge is lost over time. The true nature of the Egyptian pyramids, that knowledge was lost at the tail end of that culture. And so how are we going to retrieve it? Archaeologically speaking, it's not going to happen. You got to gain that knowledge and find those technologies within your own self. And the way you do that is purify the environment, purify your awareness, start functioning in a way that's not limited to a little box that you've been conditioned to think and function in. You see? And so a very interesting thing, and there are two names, and they're going to be in my notes if you want to look at it, because I think they're worth looking up. One is Ben Rich, and the other is Clarence Kelly Johnson. They started, I think it's called Skunk Works. It was a government branch that ended up building the stealth bombers and that. And evidently, and these guys, these are heavy hitters. They're certainly not la land people. And one of them was given a lecture at UCLA to a bunch of engineers. I think it was alumni, as I recall. And he said something that's pretty astounding. He said, we now have the technology where we could bring ET home. What do you do with that? But then there's this other guy. He said something very interesting. He said that in the desert, meaning Nevada and like that, they have, Area 51 and all like that. But they have, research, they get these UFOs and they reverse engineer them to figure out what makes them work. And he said, we have now knowledge of technologies that we could not even comprehend 50 years from now. And he said, we don't mean comprehend by knowing how they did it. We mean comprehend being able to imagine what was being done, and supposedly we've in these research laboratories, figure that stuff out. I don't know, but I think it's interesting. It's interesting to entertain. And I personally, have had a couple of experiences that, to me, there's definitely something going on, And I told this story once when we were inaugurating the Hanuman Murti. And these processes, they last for days. And one day during the inauguration, out of the blue, I just woke up at 2:00 in the morning. This is just a true story. And I looked out the window, and there's a mountain there we call Mount Vishnu, which is another whole story. But I saw this little light. At first, I thought it was a helicopter or something, but it wasn't making any noise. And it went around, and then the front of Mount Vishnu, still no noise, no flashing lights, nothing. It was just a steady light moving. And then it landed about 100 yards outside of my window. It was nighttime, so it was just a glow. And it landed right there. And it was just the strangest thing. And I can't help feeling it's related to the fact that these inaugurations are huge, a bunch of pundits and everything all going on, and chants all day long and everything. And I have to admit, I was curious to the point where I was tempted to go out and see what was there. But I have to admit, I guess, you hear these stories about abductions and, I don't know, radioactive sources and that. And I just didn't want to do it, I was afraid, I guess I'd say. And then the light went away, But what in the world could that have possibly been? And then the next night, again, just out of the blue, inauguration is still going on. 2:00 in the morning, I wake up, and I see the same light, looked like exactly the same light that went out the window in that direction, straight across. And that was it, gone. I don't know. And so that's one. But I think one that was even more meaningful to me was this whole thing with Scotty, what was it called? I'm spacing out the UFO thing in Arizona. The what's
Arizona or New Mexico?
Or New Mexico?
Roswell.
Yeah, of course. Okay, Roswell. My father was an electrical engineer, and my father was as conservative as they come. Okay, and he was, both feet on the ground all the time, and so something happened when I was just a little kid, I guess 6 or 7 years old, I don't know. And I didn't hear about it until years later when I was in college, and I flew down to Florida where my parents were then living. And my father had clipped out this newspaper article, and he said that, and so then he told the story. He said, when I was a little kid, he had a friend. We were in Columbus, Ohio at the time, and he had a friend who was an engineer scientist from Dayton, Ohio, who came to visit him. And late at night, he told my father a story about that in Dayton, Ohio. What's the name of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which was where he was working. He said they brought parts of a flying saucer. And he said, and there were also bodies from the crash. And he saw all that. And my father, he said, don't say anything. So my father never said a word about it for what was that, nearly 20 years. But then this article in Florida, in the local newspaper, some other guy wrote an article about the very same thing. And he was there and he saw it. And so that kind of shook my dad up, a little bit, And then, of course, so much has come out about Roswell since then. That has influenced me, something's going on, for sure. Okay. So other than that, they're all kinds of things going on in the current events. I've talked about it a lot, but it's almost the point where I just don't even want to talk about it anymore. It's just so, the conflicts and the arguing and the everything. But I wrote this in my notes: the sour specter of hatred, veiled in the guise of righteous heroics, is the virus released within the world. I mean, on all levels, international, governmental, personal, interpersonal, within groups, families, friends, Taliban, Al Qaeda, right left politics affiliations, conservative, liberal, liberous, religious, atheist, black, white, brown, yellow. I mean, there's no end to it. It's the age we're living in right now. But the thing is, it's a phase transition that's going on. And I think that's hard. When I talk to people, the two main things, when people come to me with their personal process or whatever, the two main things are fear and judgment, and it's on all levels. People are afraid what's going to happen. And people are very judgmental of the people on the opposite side of the polar dynamic. And so it's hard for people, even though, we've talked about the phase transition and I get it. Okay, you hear it, it's cool, but can you really believe it? But the thing is, the reality is, if we could take a step back and look at all that's going on, it's a phase transition. And we're coming into an age, it's just a few years off, hang in there. This is the dawning of the golden age. And the age of oblivion, this is its last hurrah, okay? I saw an interesting thing. Somebody sent this to me, and I actually looked at it. Laura Ingraham is a news person on Fox News, and she said something there that was really interesting. She said that she even said, I mean, is she listening to my podcast or something, Scotty? I don't know. But she said, we're coming into a golden age, and she gave the same time frame, a few years, So just hang in there. Things are hard, and they're hard for all of us. I mean, it's just craziness going on. Hang in there. We got an old golden age coming. We have the technologies and capabilities right now on this earth to bring peace and prosperity to all humanity. It's only the dedication to conflict and negativity and judgment that prevents us from making it so right now. But that's all going to change. So really, just hang in there. I got some notes here. I'm not even going to go through them all about current events, and I think it's worth scanning through. But I think that's enough for today. And Scotty, is there anything else?
No, that's it.
All right, that's it. We'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for listening.